Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. So I want to get you the latest news from this continuing saga playing out in Afghanistan. There continues to be chaos on every level with this evacuation. Here's some key facts. We're now purely operating this evacuation at the mercy of the Taliban. They control the checkpoints and indeed the entire country, except one airfield. The White House has ordered that the U.S. Embassy in Kabul must be evacuated within 72 hours. Every single staff member, every official must be out of that embassy. Everyone in the embassy is on the airfield now. Everyone, including the military, has to be out of the entire country by the 31st. Now, the Taliban set that deadline, and even the CIA could not get them to change their mind because the Taliban are controlling. They're making the calls. How do you evacuate everyone by the 31st if on that same day the military must also be out of the country? It's real tough. You can't. I mean, the situation is deteriorating so fast. 1,000 or I think more soldiers have been ordered into Afghanistan, bringing the total number now, I thought it was at 7. Right now it's at 6,000. It's important to understand that we really still don't know how many Americans and allies, Afghan allies, are even in Afghanistan or even in Kabul. We don't really know who's left. In fact, here's Pentagon spokesman John Kirby earlier saying just as much. Watch.
Two quick questions. I think yesterday you did put out a statement saying about 4,000 Americans have been evacuated.
That's correct.
Is there an updated number, and do you have the sort of base number, how many have to be evacuated now?
It's right now today north of 4,400, and I don't have a specific number of total Americans that are still in need of leaving. I don't have that.
Now, a source is saying that reps from National Security Council, NSC, the State Department, and the Joint Chiefs said that on a Senate call, there were approximately 4,100 Americans in Afghanistan. Now, that was a rumor that was immediately advertised as a misspeak. In fact, everyone from Jake Tapper to Jackie Heinrichs was reporting this, and they said that they turned around and said, actually, no, that's not the number. Wait, we'll tell you more later. So now here's Anthony Blinken just a few hours ago indicating that the reason that we don't know how many Americans are still there, it's because it's their fault that we don't know. Watch.
Let me, if I can, just take a moment to explain why the numbers are difficult to pin down with absolute precision at any given moment. And let me start with Americans who are in Afghanistan and we believe want to leave. First, as I think all of you know, the U.S. government does not track Americans' movements when they travel around the world. When Americans visit a foreign country, or if they reside there, we encourage them to enroll with the U.S. Embassy. Whether they do or not is up to them. It's voluntary. And then when Americans leave a foreign country, it's also up to them to de-enroll. Again, that's a choice, not a requirement. Particularly given the security situation in Afghanistan, for many years, we have urged Americans not to travel there. We've repeatedly asked Americans who are in Afghanistan to enroll. And since March of this year, we've sent 19 separate messages to Americans enrolled with the embassy in Kabul, encouraging and then urging them to leave the country. We've amplified those direct messages on the State Department website and on social media.
Guys, see, the only time that they monitor everything that you do is if you talk about coronavirus on Twitter or on Facebook or on Instagram or on YouTube, then you're monitored and you can be anywhere in the world and do that. Or if you have anything to do with January JX, say, I mean, maybe we should just tell them that a whole bunch of January 6 people were over there in Kabul, and then you would have all the intelligence agencies and every branch of the military over there on that, wouldn't you? I mean, that's kind of at least the idea that's being conveyed here. And we're not talking about just, you know, every Tom, Dick, and Harry who are going on a summer excursion to the hellscape that is the sun and sand of Afghanistan. No, we're talking about special immigrant visas, American citizens who were doing work for the Afghanistan, the objective that the military was sent there for. You know who does actually have an idea of who's still in the country? The Taliban. There are reports that the Taliban apparently have lists of Americans and allies because that's how they're going door to door with their lists, threatening and sometimes abducting anyone who is believed to be an American or an American ally. That's how people are getting executed in the street and being accused of being American allies. Now, if you're an American family trapped in Kabul, unable to get to the airport, yesterday you would have received this completely frightening message from the U.S. Embassy. Imagine receiving this text saying, quote, American citizens only. This is the final message for American citizens who wish to depart Kabul. American citizens who choose to remain in Afghanistan should be prepared to arrange their own departure without assistance from the U.S. government, end quote. Now, I should note that they sent that out and then they recalled it 30 minutes later before they sent it out again. It's our State Department at work, kids, through the embassy. Excellent. Yeah, just grab the kids, order up a minivan on Uber, and head on over to the airport, Mom and Dad. Just a few Taliban checkpoints on the way, right? Maybe a run-in with ISIS-K, because really that's what this is all about. Thousands of desperate people choking every last entry point to the airport. That's not a joke, but of course, this is the message from the U.S. Embassy. That message is. And then, of course, get this, as I said, 30 minutes later, they sent this message out to everybody, recalled it. In fact, NBC was reporting that they recalled it. And I mean, you know, everybody's immediately reacting to this message. So you're told to go to the airport by the U.S. Embassy. Oh, wait, no, wait, don't go to the airport. On second thought, no. But maybe you should get there by August 31st. Maybe, after they resent it out. Because according to Pentagon spokesman John Kirby, the U.S. is not going to control the Kabul airport after the August 31st departure. Watch.
The mission is over, and when we are leaving the airport will not be the United States our responsibility anymore. So how it gets managed going forward will be something that the Taliban, who are now in Kabul, will have to manage them on their own with them, and I assume with the international community. But that won't be an American responsibility.
Now, we're completely ignoring all the families and everything that these interpreters and these informants have raised up during the time that they've been, for the past 20 years, that they've been helping the American military. Now, at this point, if you are an American citizen, you're trapped in Afghanistan, Kirby says your fate is totally up to the Taliban and the international community to decide how you're getting home or how that airport's going to go forward, the management of it. Now, of course, you can only imagine thousands of life and death situations playing out on the ground that we don't even hear about. But here's one that we do know about. Listen to this. More than 20 students and 16 parents from the Cajon Valley Union School, this is in Southern California, they visited Afghanistan. I have no idea why. It's California. That's all I can tell you. On summer vacation. Maybe they thought, wait, let's go to the country that we want most California to resemble. Now they're trapped there. This is awful. I mean, I don't care what your politics are. No one should be in this position, along, of course, with thousands of other people in the middle of this chaotic U.S. exit. Again, let's just step back and say it. How does this administration botch this evacuation so badly that our State Department wouldn't have even warned a school that Afghanistan is going to be the last? Look, guys, we're going to be leaving, just FYI. I mean, maybe it had to do, maybe it was on some historical or I have no idea, but they went there. You can go wherever you want, right? It should be a free world. However, how badly is this botched? Incompetence, chaos, foolishness, on the part of this administration everywhere you look. And everybody seems to understand this except the administration itself. Has there been one admission so far from anybody in this administration that they're at fault? That they missed a step? Mistakes were made? Far from it, in fact. What you have instead is the administration that seems to want back pats and high fives. They unapologetically even take moments to highlight what a great job they've done, while at the same time admitting that they're at the complete and total mercy of the Taliban. So listen to Jen Psaki touting this evacuation as some sort of modern version of Dunkirk, right? This is going to be the achievement that's going to go down, guys. Watch this kittens and sunshine spin.
I would say that this is now on track, Peter, to be the largest airlift in U.S. history. And that is bringing American citizens out. It is bringing our Afghan partners out. It is bringing allies out. So no, I would not say that is anything but a success.
It's not, though. I mean, this withdrawal, it's a big success. In fact, it's the biggest airlift in history. Does that include the people hanging off the landing gear of the C-17? Does that? I mean, if she wants to say that it's the biggest airlift in history, fine. Oh, it's the biggest airlift in history if you ignore the actual Berlin airlift from Cold War and Israeli airlift and all the other airlifts that preceded this. If you ignore all of that, then yeah, that's right. It is the biggest airlift in the history of the world. Just like she could say she is the only female White House spokesperson to ever stand behind that podium. Of course, if you ignore all of the other female White House spokespeople. Yeah, the people falling from the sky, I don't think that they would say that that was a successful airlift. The administration having no idea how many Americans are trapped in Afghanistan, the Taliban in control, and then of course you have ISIS-K. It's like the special K of cornflakes or something, right? They come rolling into Kabul, and now apparently they're going to get into a fight with Taliban after they had already fought them in Jalalabad because ISIS-K, which is a variant of ISIS, had a bunch of people from the Taliban who defected because they were unhappy with that terrorist faction. I mean, can you get, like, there's not enough terrorism? Like, you need to go to a worse group? Now, not to worry, according to Jen Psaki, it's actually time to start awarding the administration some smiley stickers, gold stars. You guys remember those Lisa Frank puffy stickers? Yeah, you do, right? Maybe some of those. If this is what success looks like, if that's what success is, what does failure look like? Not favorite, because I can't really put there's not really a bright lining, a silver lining to this, but I do have to say, even Adam Schiff, who is one consonant away from the truth, Adam Schiff, who believes that Russians are hiding under his bed. Adam Schiff, who looks like a tweaked out, middle-aged Precious Moments figurine. Adam Schiff, he even knows that Jen Psaki has got to be hitting the crack rock the size of the state of Texas. Watch this.
Jeff, do you think that it's possible for the evacuations to finish up before August 31st?
I think it's possible, but I think it's very unlikely, given the number of Americans who still need to be evacuated, the number of SIVs, the number of others who are members of the Afghan press, civil society leaders, women leaders. It's hard for me to imagine all of that can be accomplished between now and the end of the month.
Now, you know, they got him right as he was walking out of an intelligence briefing. So they heard the truth. And then he comes right out and the press meets him. And then he completely contradicted everything that Jen Psaki and everyone else had said about the kittens and sunshine, happy-go-lucky, big success spin. Yeah. Man, they are all over the place. And it also kind of, to me, I got the impression that Schiff wanted to give himself a little bit of space between that and Psaki's spin. It's like the administration wants there to be this narrative pivot. But either they didn't send out the memo to people like Schiff, or Schiff is just not having anything to do with it, right? He knows when stuff hits the fan. I could just sit here and rip puns about his name for the rest of the show. The new narrative, though, it goes like this. Sure, it started poorly, but oh my gosh, look at how much progress we're making on this evacuation, thanks to all of our hard work. And it's time we started talking about the bang-up job that we're doing now, don't you think, legacy media? I mean, apparently that's kind of what the narrative is. That's the new push. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman, she's a company woman. She got that narrative pivot memo from the White House, and she has been tweeting more than a neglected baby sparrow, going on and on about what an incredible job the administration is doing. Here's some of those self-congratulatory tweets. She says, quote, "This morning, Undersecretary State P and I convened the foreign ministers and political directors from 28 allies and partners to coordinate our efforts in Afghanistan. It's the fourth time that we've spoken as a group in a week. This is the work of diplomacy." Now, in this same tweet storm, she also said, quote, "No other nation, none, could have put together this global network of countries on 4 continents to host evacuees. When we say we're putting our alliances and partnerships front and center, this is why. In times of crisis, we have each other's backs," end quote. Sounds like an Insta slogan. Yes, Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman, she's feeling great about this withdrawal. It's all running like a well-oiled machine. No other nation could do what you did, don't you know? So in other words, everybody should be very impressed. As you know, every so often the administration has to stick the president in front of the teleprompter and carefully script some words. Here's President Biden yesterday reading words.
We agreed that we will continue to our close cooperation to get people out as efficiently and safely as possible. We are currently on a pace to finish by August the 31st. The sooner we can finish, the better. Each day of operations brings added risk to our troops. But the completion by August 31st depends upon the Taliban continuing to cooperate and allow access to the airport for those who we're transporting out, and no disruptions to our operations. In addition, I've asked the Pentagon and the State Department for contingency plans to adjust the timetable should that become necessary.
I believe in doing good public services, and I feel like one of those calls for good public service is to alert his team that he's either very sleepy or please, for the love of all things holy, increase his font size on the teleprompter because he's going to give himself a headache. It's all totally in control, guys. It's okay. Mistakes were made, some. It's okay. We just, we're gonna make that up, right? We're gonna get some help from the Taliban. We're good to go. Biden talks about the Taliban like they're the French government or something. I mean, just gonna go phone up the Taliban, meet in an Afghan cafe somewhere, have some kebabs, and work out this evacuation. So chill, we got this. Maybe I'll bring H-Man in, Hunter. Speaking of the French, last week even they could do what we couldn't. They coordinated with consular authorities and they used the French police and their special forces teams to get their people out. I mean, apparently they're not waiting around for the Taliban to feel philanthropic suddenly and help them out. And while the Biden administration seems to feel great about their efforts, G7 leaders don't. The Brits, they literally held him in contempt last week in Parliament. Wall Street Journal says he broke NATO. And the Germans, well, they're throwing in as well. Angela Merkel said this, and I quote, she says, quote, "I am thinking of the pain of families of soldiers who lost their lives fighting there. Now everything seems so hopeless," end quote. Gosh, it's like the gothist Germanist thing that you could possibly say. It's like even beyond emo. According to sources, and sidebar to that, who was it? Is it Washington Post, Democracy Dies in Darkness? They want that as a slogan now. Merkel said in a very sharp attack on Biden's administration that the hasty and messy withdrawal by the administration was motivated by domestic political reasons rather than geostrategic necessities. Duh. I mean, meanwhile, despite backpatting himself, the American public, they're not buying it. Due to this chaotic wrap up of this undeclared 20-year plus authorized use of military force in Afghanistan, Biden's overall job approval is actually in the sewage pit outside of the airport where everyone is standing in Kabul. In fact, it stands at 41% versus 55% who disapprove. That is staggering. It is, I think, the lowest of any administration at any point at this time. I don't think that you can say that this is a successful administration at this point. They're crashing and burning. No wonder they want to talk about the hurry up FDA approvals and COVID. Meanwhile, if bungling the Afghanistan withdrawal and handing the Taliban a victory weren't enough, Biden decided to hand another big win to China, guys, right? Yeah. Let's approve the license applications worth hundreds of millions of dollars for China's blacklisted telecom company, Huawei. That's right, the same CCP that gave the world a giant case of the bat flu. The same China whose state-run media is busy tweeting about how bad we've handled Afghanistan and how we won't help our allies like in Taiwan. Yeah, that China. Biden just overturned Trump's last-second executive order and will allow Huawei to buy chips for its growing auto component business. Right? So let's see. The Russians get a pipeline while we kill ours. He helps to destabilize NATO. Big gift to Putin. Iran gets to be back in our good graces. Afghanistan's handed over to the Taliban with thousands of our people trapped inside. And the Communist Chinese Party, who seem to both own us and hate us all at once, they get our semiconductors. Wow. Building back better? I think he meant everybody else. This is a weak, cowering, and feckless administration who's selling our country down the river as we're humiliated in spectacular fashion on the world stage. So why would anyone fear us, and why would any ally expect us to help them? They don't. Now, understand the administration approved this deal to sell semiconductors to China, while Kamala Harris talks tough to China while in Singapore, and then later, and during another diplomatic trip in Vietnam, posed in front of a Ho Chi Minh statue. Apparently, the vice president dared for the first time. What's next? Seriously, Mao? She dared for the first time to chide China about bullying other nations in the South China Sea. That's all well and good, but you just literally approved a deal to sell semiconductors to one of their state-owned companies that's been accused of spying on us. Talk tough and get rolled, and then sell out. That seems to be our foreign policy. We don't have a plan because we have a clueless administration. So clueless, like I said earlier, they wouldn't even let the president speak without being fully scripted. To show you what I mean, I'll leave you with this, which just happened actually a little bit earlier today. President Biden is asked what happens to Americans that don't make it out of Afghanistan. And when he goes to answer, they cut his mic. Take a look.
Thank you all very much, and thank the press for being here. We're going to go private now.
Mr. President, if Americans are still in Afghanistan after the final what would we do if Americans are still there after the deadline?
No answer, no questions. This is not the leadership America needs, and it's getting more dangerous by the day. So we have Afghanistan refugees arriving by the droves in the United States. And so how many more people need to be rescued? What happens to our other SIVs? Where are they going? We're going to find out. Jason Beardsley joins us next to discuss this and so much more. Keep it here.
We're conducting thorough security screening in the intermediate stops they're making for anyone who is not a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident of the United States. Anyone arriving in the United States will have undergone a background check. And we must all work together to resettle thousands of Afghans who ultimately qualify for refugee status. The United States will do our part, and we are already working closely with refugee organizations to rebuild a system that was purposely destroyed by my predecessor.
Oh, for the love. Wow, couldn't get that. That's going to be a whole thing tomorrow. Just bear with me. So that's President Biden yesterday discussing the vetting process for refugees coming from Afghanistan. Quick note, didn't you just hear from Blinken that they actually don't know who's all over and who's coming over because they just nobody registered, and that's why? Isn't that you? We just literally heard that just hours before. Jason Beardsley is the National Executive Director for the Association of the U.S. Navy, and he's also a retired Green Beret Master Sergeant. He joins us now to discuss this whole entire problem, not just here. I mean, I'm also terrified at what this even means for our intelligence on the ground. There's so much to discuss here. Jason, appreciate your service and giving us your time now on this. Let me just get your initial reaction to everything that has gone down in the past week and a half.
Thanks. You made mention that it's a bit of a disaster. We've watched this. Very hard for service members who put a lot of time into this effort to watch everything be dithered away by either very poor planning or just bad decision making from the outset. I see a lot of this as part of the problem, giving a military operation and the exfiltration of diplomats to the State Department as the lead. This is clearly a military operation, and when they do that and they plan it well, we can execute these operations. But in this case, we saw a lot of lead entities in the State Department side who can't give a lot of the right answers. Today, thank goodness, we got some numbers, but it's been a long time coming for this point of clarity.
You make a really good point just now that I have not heard anybody else make, and that the State Department should not be taking the lead on this because it is a military operation. And when you have that difference in perspective, that military strategy and that approach to protecting these people and getting them out, boy, that really does explain why that's kind of like the disaster that it is. How in the world did that happen?
It's hard to actually calculate, but what we do know is going back to Secretary Lloyd Austin or Jake Sullivan or really any of the spokespeople, you heard them saying over and over again that State Department was in charge or this was a state operation. They would admit to having capacity, but the authority wasn't on theirs. So all along the way, what we really, I think, see Joe Biden is a creature of the foreign policy establishment. He came out of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and probably has a lot of trust with the diplomats who do a wonderful job in diplomatic channels. But when Taliban are closing in on a city and overtaking a capital, that's no longer a diplomatic mission. And when we do that wrong, you get to these late emergency crush pushes to get out of the airport. This could have been done so much better.
Yeah, it could have been done so much better. And I think we could have also maybe perhaps not had such a hit taken on our intelligence. I was reading a little earlier today, we're talking with Jason Beardsley about how we had our, basically on the ground, I think since 2012, maybe 2014, we had pulled our on the ground surveillance, reconnaissance, et cetera, and we were really going off of like satellite surveillance. And I worry too, because even before Afghanistan, there was essentially like a dead space, a black hole in Iraq where we had nobody on the ground. We weren't able to get intelligence. Even if we had to go in, it was still dangerous even for special ops. Looking at Afghanistan, we're kind of setting this up in the same way by either leaving people behind, which who would want to work with us again if we did that, and then taking all our assets out. Everyone sees how this happened. They're not going to ever want to enter into a relationship, Jason, like that with the U.S. again.
We really hurt ourselves in that. And something you mentioned here that's really critical to understand is the intelligence that we have either on the ground developed with relationships and people versus that we do remotely. We went through this before in 1979 and 78 when we started to rely on keyhole satellite and satellite technology. And then by the time we got to 9/11, the entire assessment in the community was we can no longer rely on remote intelligence gathering equipment to do the job that humans do best. So the fact that we're replaying or re-seeing that sort of habitual kind of knee-jerk reaction is awful, and it puts service members at risk. You know, I represent the Association of the United States Navy. That's Marines, that's sailors. These are people that have been on the ground. They knew the ground conditions for the last 12 years. The Special Intelligence Inspector General report for Afghanistan has reported for 13 years in a row that this was coming into a tragic ending and conclusion. So no one can pretend they didn't know this. And for the intelligence community and the generals at the Pentagon to have let this slip to the current disaster, that is malfeasance.
It is, and I keep seeing the images, and I've been hearing stories of people who they show their legitimate paperwork, like they had worked as like a translator or something with military, and they were even just reports this afternoon that they're not even being allowed to even get through onto the airfield itself in Kabul. How does this end, and if not in a hostage situation?
Tragically, it ends sloppily. We've gotten lucky on a few occasions. Again, some of the numbers we heard today from Secretary Blinken are encouraging, but at the end of this, we had a different means to get these people out. We wrote a letter along with other veteran service organizations to say, before you withdraw, you should start processing these special immigrant visa applications. And we could not compel the administration to do that on an expedited path. So now we're looking at the results, the consequences of that. And the only thing we can surmise, again, from afar is this must have been more about optics than about on the ground action that would have been resulted in such a better condition. So now it's left to NGOs, private companies, people bootstrapping operations to get in there. I've got friends on the ground. You hear awful reports. And at the end of this, you asked how it would end. We don't know yet, but there's a long burn now if we end up shutting the door on thousands of people that were left behind.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and the great point about how you said you had had written the administration trying to get them to expedite this. I was reading that it can take somewhere up to like 800 days to just get this application going. And these are people who put the lives of their families, like their children, themselves, their business. They stand to have their entire family tree wiped out if they're caught by the Taliban doing this. I mean, these people are sacrificing a lot. What was the reason, Jason? Did they tell you why they couldn't expedite it?
They were very incommunicative, so we didn't really get a sense of the whys or the wherefores. But listen, everyone knew this was coming. And for, again, 2 decades now, soldiers that served on the ground side by side with wonderful people have been saying that we need to get our people out. And when the Taliban crushes in on this, they're going to put them on a list, and they know how to find these people. They are a brutal regime. So what we're really worried about now is how do they now move to another route or another facilitation method out of the country? Because once we close down the base there, it's going to be left up to the locals, Massoud's people, Northern Alliance, others to actually facilitate the escape. So not the best way to have done this. And again, I'd suggest that when we do this from the Department of Defense, we know how to do it. It's planned. It's a very complex operation, but it can be done. We just didn't do this one right.
No, not at all. Jason, I know that you work so much and advocate on refugees that have been these Afghan, these informants and our translators and everyone else that have been working with us to get them over here. But I wanted to ask you as well, really quickly, is just from, I know the administration hasn't come out and said it, but just from your experience, I wanted to get your perspective on this because the timeline shifted so dramatically. And I just noticed, after ISIS-K rolls in, I know they've been fighting with Taliban in Jalalabad. Is that really ultimately, do you think, the catalyst for this expedited evacuation? I mean, absolutely out by the 31st. Let's go, because there could be some sectarian fighting here.
Well, I think, one, we can guess that, but 2, we can listen to the administration. They've told us that all along. They wanted to hit the deadline. And then we heard from spokesperson after spokesperson after spokesperson saying essentially that we are at the graces, the good graces, if you can imagine that, of the Taliban. So right now, Americans that have served there or those who care, this is a time where we're all hurting a little bit. We need to lift these people up in prayer. And really, we've got a little bit lucky here, but we should never be putting our foreign policy in the bucket of luck.
Oh, amen to that. Jason, I appreciate what you've done, and I hope all of our veterans out there, especially those Afghanistan veterans, I hope they realize, I mean, my son was barely 6 months old when 9/11 happened, and my son and all the other kids his age, including his friends who have enlisted already, they had 20 years of not having another attack on U.S. soil because of the work of the boots on the ground there. So I hope that those veterans realize how much they accomplished, and an entire generation thanks them. It's awesome. So thank you for what you do. Appreciate you.
You're welcome. These are heroic members, and we'll always know that. We stand tall. We're ready to answer the call whenever the country needs us, but we can't afford to have sloppy policy and endless wars.
No, can't. Thank you so much. Jason Beardsley, appreciate your time. God bless you.
Thank you.
All right, folks. In a recent article, the great Victor Davis Hanson says everything Joe Biden touches turns to dross, and only Victor Davis Hanson would use that word. And he'll join us next. You don't want to miss it. Keep it here. From runaway inflation to race relations to the border to Afghanistan coronavirus policy, Victor Davis Hanson is here to make the case that Joe Biden has the opposite of the Midas touch. In fact, everything Biden touches, he says, turns to dross. Victor Davis Hanson it's very good to see you. Good to have you on, my friend. Thank you so much for joining me. I love what you wrote here in one of your latest pieces. You said Biden is a hostage of both the left and Hunter Biden. His task is to ram down a hard left agenda in the fashion of a torpedo that blows itself up when it hits the target. The left ensured that the base would not bolt in 2020, and so he's got to make good on that. He really did not, and I think that kind of sort of sets his trajectory here. He really didn't leave himself with any options, so he's not really calling the shots, is he?
Not really, to the extent that he ever disagrees. That's a big controversy. To the extent that he disagrees now with the hard left, if he did or he didn't, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. He has no freedom of choice. He made a Faustian bargain with him, and it's basically, I'll give you a veneer of moderation and acceptability. I'm the non-tweeting guy, and then I'll usher in your agenda. But there is some little bit of psychological payback. I think he felt he was the underling of Obama and was deprecated or condescendingly treated. And now he's going to be the real progressive president that got through all of the failed Obama policy agendas.
Yeah, I think you hit on something there, because I get the impression from him that he sort of views himself as this like second coming of FDR in a way. He was the one that really had the economic, the know-how, the knowledge, the foreign policy experience, and he played second fiddle to Barack Obama. Now he's got to break away. But I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen everything turn out as disaster. I don't think he's had a success. He hasn't had a success at all. And it's kind of shocking to see him do the absolute opposite to what common sense would dictate. What do you think is going on? Maybe because I feel like we're watching the final battle of the soul of the party sort of sputter out with him every time he's in front of a television camera.
Yeah, I think he and the left thought that whatever Trump did, they were going to undo, and they didn't realize that they have to make a critique of what Trump did. So on economic policy, we had growth and low unemployment, and no inflation as we do now. On the border, we had a secure border. We had none of the problems we had now. Same thing with the foreign policy. The Abrams Accord was so much better in the Middle East than what we're seeing. We had a plan to get out of Afghanistan on a graduated schedule where we wouldn't have had this mess. We didn't have this embrace of this lunatic critical race theory and on all of the subordinate Antifa, BLM policies. And so we could go on energy insufficiency. We were energy sufficient. We didn't beg Saudi Arabia after making fun of it as a carbon polluter, then saying, please pump more oil where gas is too high, because he cut back 3 million barrels of production per day.
Yeah. And it came out today as well, right after, on the heels of giving Russia that massive gift, the approval of the completion of Nord Stream 2, destabilizing NATO, making Germany dependent on one of the very entities that NATO was created to oppose. And then it came out today that he's went ahead and greenlit the approval for China to purchase all of these chips for automobile chips and for these components and superconductors, et cetera, hundreds of millions of dollars, giving China now an edge, giving Huawei an edge here in the U.S. after the previous administration, former President Trump, worked so hard to make sure that Huawei wasn't going to get a toe in edgewise. And now here we are. And then, of course, right after it was announced, then we see Kamala Harris posing in front of a Ho Chi Minh statue there in Vietnam. So it's just a bang-up Southeastern Asian trip for the Biden administration.
Yeah, I think people forget that when Biden came in, he said he was going to be the internationalist, the globalist, the person who was going to cement relationships with NATO. And all he's done, there's going to be repercussions of Afghanistan in the long term, or maybe not the long term, the short term, or quite simply, Germany is not going to listen to us anymore about Russia, and Europe in general is not going to enlist with the United States to contain China. They feel it's too lucrative and they can't count on us. I don't think any of the EU people will listen to our warnings if we even gave them about the Iran deal. So we're going to be alone, and that's very ironic because he told us that that's what Trump had created, but Trump actually strengthened NATO. He got people there to kick in another $100 million in military preparedness. He had strengthened Asia, Australia, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea. They all felt that they had a friend that would protect them and they didn't have to give in to Chinese threats and make concessions. I think they're all going to be freelancing now because we're undependable.
I think that's a great point as well. And we were always told that the American image would be bolstered by the election of Joe Biden. But I don't ever remember an American president, do you, that was actually condemned? I mean, they held him in contempt in Parliament last week, UK.
Yeah, and you can see why. I mean, we lost, Dana, more military equipment in 2 weeks in Afghanistan than we've given to Israel in 30 years. It's 75 to 85 billion. That's more than we've given to Israel in total in 35 years. So it just staggers the imagination. We even haven't come to grips with it. And we've never before surrendered basically to a thuggish regime and then begged them to let us leave the battlefield while they are obstructing us and saying, get out, but we're not going to let you get out, so we're going to have to negotiate about this so-called timeline. There is no timeline in Afghanistan. There's only one timeline. It's at what point can we get all of our people out safely and our dependents so we don't end up for the next year with 1,000 Bo Bergdahl scenarios. And that's all that matters. He can call it any date, any name he wants, but we will not be free of Afghanistan until we have people that they can't home, that they will not leverage. You know what's going to happen. As soon as the military's out, they're going to play nice and say they're reformed. As soon as the military's out, they're going to start taking care of business with dependents. They're going to kill them. They're going to hang them. They're going to torture them. And then they're going to go after Americans who are all over that country. One of the ironies, Dana, have you noticed that he only talks about how many people we got out? He never tells us how many are there or left. It's like, it would be as if you're talking about the carnage on a weekend in Chicago, and the mayor said, well, 100,000 people were not killed this weekend. Well, that I think it's really good that we brought people out, but we don't have any idea how many are there or what the magnitude of the problem is.
Or they're referenced by Jen Psaki or Jake Sullivan as Americans who choose to stay, which I think is weird phrasing. I wanted to get your reaction to that because I don't know if anyone chooses to stay in the hellscape that is Afghanistan. I mean, maybe they do if they have family and they're just trying to figure out how to get out of this and get more of their family to come with them. But I felt it was very disingenuous the way that they presented that at every single one of these press avails.
Well, I think everybody who knows that if they're going to leave the obscurity or maybe the safety of their apartment or their home, and they're going to go try to venture to the airport, that's kind of a hellscape in itself. And so she can say all she wants, but if you make the conditions almost impossible to leave, then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, well, they're staying. They didn't want to, take a risk with their lives to go 8-10 miles. And so she's made it impossible for people to make a decision based on logic or a cost-to-benefit analysis. So I think in a way, all of this discourages people from even trying. I guess when we go, they're going to have less status than Bo Bergdahl did. I mean, he was a person who pretty much was treasonous on the field of battle, and we gave over 4 people that were in the hierarchy of Taliban, and we paralyzed the country, and yet we're going to have that to the magnitude of 100, 1,000, 10,000. We don't know. It's so bizarre, I think, Dan, that we can't even fathom what's going on. We've never experienced anything like that. The magnitude of what we're doing, and we've never yanked troops out and then said, well, you know, you're more important than the people you're there to protect, that serviced your helicopters, fed you, cleaned your clothes, helped you repair your machinery. And by the way, you're going to be facing in the next 10 years jihadists from all over the world. They're going to look like you. They're going to have the same equipment, the same night vision. It's going to be an international jihadist arms mart and training center in a way that it wasn't even before 9/11.
Some of the night vision they have, the optics that they have, some of the latest that our military had that gave us such an advantage on the battlefield, now in the hands of the Taliban. And as you said, this is stuff we didn't even share with anyone else, not even Israel. I mean, it just floors me. You know, I look at this situation as, you know, from a civilian perspective, and I say, if I were going to try to undercut the United States and destabilize NATO and really just create another black spot in the Middle East from which we have no eyes or ears on the ground, we're not going to be able to anticipate or prepare for anything. These are the exact steps that I take. And I'm leaning towards Occam's razor on this because I haven't found any other good substitute explanation. And heaven knows that the administration hasn't given one. I'll get your final thoughts on this.
Well, that's a very good point. We're all trying to rack our brain thinking nobody could be this stupid or this reckless or this inhumane to all in one fell swoop destroy military reputation, destroy the reputation of the military itself, the American security reputation, endanger lives, get back to a pre-9/11 situation. But so why is he doing that? And I think the answer is that he listened to the last person he talked to, and one of these advisors, maybe Sullivan, who knows, maybe Blinken came in and said, you know, it'll be calm and then we'll have a big parade on September 11th and don't worry about it. That's all I can come up with because it's so absurd that it doesn't make any sense. I think Americans were not angry as they're getting because at first they were bewildered. What is this? We've never seen anything like it. Now that they're starting to absorb it and digest it, they're going to get really angry. And I think that's why we see these precipitous drops. And I don't think there's a basement or a cellar to them. I think it's going to go down. And this tough guy, you know, as I said the other day to someone, if he'd just be as tough with the Taliban as he used to talk about corn pop with a chain or taking Trump around the gym and beating him up, all that braggart, tough guy Joe from Scranton, but he can't even direct that animus to the enemy.
That's a great point. Yeah, we could use some corn pop talk right now, at least, just something to help us out there. Goodness, it's so good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us, my friend, as always. A pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
All right, folks, our crack intelligence agencies are at it again. And when they weren't busy spying on U.S. citizens, they had time to look into that lab escape theory. And what did they find? Yeah, we'll tell you. Keep it here. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-owned coffee company, and they proudly serve premium coffee roasted, talon roasted by Eagles for people who love America. That's right. Veteran CEO and founder Evan Hafer spent over 7 years on the ground overseas with U.S. Special Forces and is a CIA contractor. Black Rifle Coffee is committed to Evan's mission. They spent millions supporting veteran, law enforcement, and first responder causes, and they spent millions on conservative issues too. So this August, Black Rifle Coffee Company invites you to just drink your coffee and stop arguing with people on Twitter, right? And enjoy good coffee. I said it's talon roasted. That may be true. We don't actually know. We do, but let's pretend we don't. Black Rifle Coffee is here to fuel your way. Their high-quality beans are imported from all over the world, and like I said, talon roasted 5 days a week at their facilities in Tennessee and Utah. Head on over to blackriflecoffee.com/DanaTV. Use code DanaTV at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. Fuel your pre-fall with America's coffee. Black Rifle Coffee. Our intelligence agencies, following the directive of President Biden, have been busy trying to determine whether the virus that's killed 4 million people, hobbled the world's economy, caused children to have to put face masks all over their entire heads all day in school, and caused Australia to return to being a penal colony once again. The virus, yes, the bat flu, whether that virus indeed escaped from a lab in China. Now, these are the same intelligence agencies who couldn't download WhatsApp from the App Store and watch as the Taliban used the app in full view of the public internet. By the way, an app owned by Facebook to take over Afghanistan in a matter of like a couple of weeks. That actually happened. Now, our intelligence agencies missed this. Maybe they were really engrossed in the White Rage sequel. I don't know. But these same intelligence agencies have been so busy trying to figure out if the Wuhan coronavirus came from the Wuhan lab. And their conclusion They don't know. And you know what? They actually might be telling you the truth, maybe not for once. They are almost always wrong after all. So maybe now they're just admitting that they don't know. They've been too busy doing other things. Of course, we do spend billions on our intelligence agencies, only to find over and over again that some of the intelligence is not good. On the other hand, many brave reporters and even your average idiot recognize that it was really suspicious that the Wuhan lab was just a few miles from the Wuhan wet market. Now, it's a known fact that Dr. Fauci directed money to the Wuhan lab to study coronaviruses, and that seems super sus. It's also known that scientists at the lab were taking bat coronaviruses and adding functionality to them, like adding insertions to the virus that made it more capable of being spread from a bat to a human. Now, according to Dr. Fauci, that was all done to better understand and then stop, of course, future pandemics. The Chinese Communist Party gave Fauci their word, which is trustworthy as all communists are, that everything that was happening in the Wuhan lab was safe, so you could take that to the bank. Anyhow, you would think that the gain-of-function research would be another clue that maybe the Wuhan lab is the source of our viral discontent. Yet instead, we're to believe that a bat coronavirus from a bat that only lives in caves several thousand miles away, that this bat virus that doesn't infect humans jumped magically into a human at a wet market and then infected the world. But those bat coronaviruses that were being tampered with at the lab to make them more infectious, that cannot be where this pandemic came from. No. Our intelligence agencies, they just can't really be sure that that's where it started. Don't you see? No smoking gun, no January 6th anything, no consensus, they say. Meanwhile, the Biden administration approved the sale of semiconductors to the Communist Chinese Party. And it seems wise when you think how they might have caused a pandemic for which they take no responsibility. But again, our intelligence agencies cannot find a smoking gun, just like they couldn't download WhatsApp. Speaking of the CCP, they are very busy in threatening any country that even so much as suggests the virus might have come from the Wuhan lab. You're going to get it if you suggest this. Please ban me. According to our intelligence agencies, that must not be a smoking gun either. Nope, that all sounds like a communist regime with completely nothing to hide. Now, it's reported that many in the Wuhan lab became sick with flu-like symptoms in November of 2019. But that happens all the time in China, we're told. In fact, the Chinese often go to the hospital, and they do so for the most minor of symptoms, the CCP said. Yes, that passes the smell test, says our intelligence agencies. We trust you. And so that's where it stands after a 90-day probe. Our intelligence agencies just don't know where in the heck that bat virus came from. Maybe because they're too incompetent. Maybe because they're just too into White Rage Part 2. Maybe, I don't know, we should have told them that it had something to do with January 6th. I don't know. Maybe it's the administration. They don't want to know where the virus came from. Because after all, they might just have to do something about it if they did. That does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.